Hello and welcome to our seasonal sampler series. In this video, you'll learn about mitering corners with Y-seams while making these 6-inch baskets. Ready to begin? You can find this supply list for the springtime sampler below with the links to this basket pattern and to the other videos in this series. If you're just interested in making one basket, you can get by with 6 to 7 inch scraps of fabric for the background, handles, and basket. Refer to this handout for your cutting sizes. I'm not going to go over how I drew up this pattern, which led to the cutting sizes, but if you're interested in finding out how to draft your own basket pattern, you might like to check out this video. As you cut your pieces, arrange them on a board or a piece of cardboard, as it will help keep them in order when you move from the cutting table to the machine and to the ironing board. There are a number of half-square triangles in this pattern. I use a quick cutting method for these. Basically, you add 7/8 to the finished size of the triangle. So for this triangle, the finished size is 3 inches. If I add 7/8 to that, I come up with 3 7/8 inches. So I'll cut a square 3 7/8 inches, and then I'll cut that square on the diagonal. I only need one of these down at the bottom here, so there is some waste. But don't throw this away, just put it aside for now. These triangles finish up at 1.5 inches, and so I'll cut a 2 3/8 inch square and then cut that on the diagonal to get these two triangles. This triangle finishes at 4.5 inches, so I'll cut a square at 5 3/8 inches and then cut that on the diagonal. This is an extra piece that you won't need for this basket, but if you were making 2 of these, you'd be all ready to go on your second basket. Now, the finished size of this triangle is 2.5 inches. You could cut a square at 3 3/8 inches and then cut it on the diagonal, or you can pull out the other half of this piece and measure 3 3/8 inches. Make a mark, double check, see that you've got 3 3/8 inches. Line up your ruler on those marks and trim. And here's triangle E. The basket handles are 1.5 inch wide strips. If you have a long piece of fabric, it's probably easiest to cut one 12-inch strip and then cut it in half. If you have a smaller scrap of fabric, then just cut 2 6-inch pieces. You'll put right sides together, and then you'll cut a 45-degree angle on the end. You can use the markings on your board. Here's my 45-degree angle. I'll place the edge of the strip on one of these horizontal lines, and let's back this up a little. Line up your ruler on that line and then cut. If you don't have a 45-degree line on your board, you can use the 45-degree line on your ruler. Put right sides together, line up your strip on a horizontal line, place the 45-degree line along the edge of your strip, and cut. These handles are actually a little bit longer than you'll need, but later on you'll cut them down to size. Put right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam. After sewing, you'll want to press. Make a note to yourself that these two might look the same, but they're actually mirror images of each other. Make sure you don't take them over to the sewing machine like this and sew both of them the same. If you do that, it won't work. Lay out your block. Put right sides together. You'll have little ears on either end. These little ears should take up about a 1/4 inch of space. So this is way too big. Let me move this down a bit. So that's about a 1/4 inch. Let's turn this over. And that's about a 1/4 inch. I'm ready to sew. After stitching, I press towards the basket. I put right sides together, making sure I've got about 1/4 of an inch there and 1/4 of an inch there. Take the corner triangle, fold it in half, and press. Put right sides together, lining up the center of this triangle with the point of the basket. After stitching, press towards the corner. Then trim the little ears. This basket pattern will give you a chance to try out a mitered corner before tackling a larger project like a quilt border. Most borders on quilts are either box or mitered. This border has all straight seams. Mitered borders have these Y seams in each corner. I like to use registration marks or dots when sewing these seams. At this intersection where all 3 pieces meet, that's where I put the dots. And those dots are there to remind me that there shouldn't be any stitches past these dots. Before I start sewing, I want to show you how I mark the edges. I went over 1/4 inch here and 1/4 inch here, and I put a dot at the intersection. This is my registration mark. I also marked a dot at this intersection. If I'm doing a lot of these Y seams, I have a little jig here that I made where I can just put the dot right through that hole, like I did on this one. I line that up, there's a little hole there, and there's the dot. I'll put right sides together. I take a pin and go through this dot, and then go through that dot. Line up this edge, and pin. To get started, I'll put my needle down on this side of the pin. I'll sew a few stitches, then I'll back stitch a few, making sure not to go over the pin, and then I'll come forward. At this end, there's not a Y seam, so I can just continue sewing. Here's what that seam looks like. It remains open here. Now I'm ready to add this side. I'll pull this back, put a pin through my dot, and then on the back, I'll line up this side, put my needle down, sew a few stitches forward, a few stitches backwards, making sure to stay on this side of that pin, and then I'll stitch. So now I need to stitch this seam. Put right sides together and pull this section out. Put a pin in those dots. Put a little scrap of fabric here for leader. Sew onto my fabric, making sure to stop before I get to that pin, and then take a few stitches backwards. In a perfect world, all of these stitches should meet, but it's okay if you have a little space, because when you open it up, you'll end up with something that looks like this, and all of your stitches are locked. Take this to the ironing board and press. And now I'm ready to trim. Line up the triangle on one of your mat lines and trim. You can also trim off the ears. Put right sides together, line up this seam with this point, and stitch. Press your block. If you decide you want to make the springtime sampler, you'll need 3 of these. In the next video in the seasonal sampler series, you'll learn how to make this pinwheel block using flying geese units. Hope you stay tuned. Thanks for visiting LearnHowToQuilt.com. Please share our patterns and videos with your friends. Thanks.